It was the last period on a typical Friday. The weather outside was dreary, just the way it always was in late winter. The school hallways were buzzing with excitement for the weekend, and the much awaited spring break were almost here. As usual, we were stuck in Mr. Thompson's calculus class, where time crawled at a glacial pace. I could feel the restlessness in the room. Everyone seemed antsy, tapping their feet or glancing at the clock, willing it to tick faster. Mr. Thompson, our usually laid-back teacher, had decided to break the monotony by pulling up a brand logo quiz on Sporkle. The class groaned, but most of us went along with it, laughing at how easy it was to guess the logos. I can still remember the moment it happened, right after my friend Alex shouted out the correct answer to the Adidas logo. The dean's voice suddenly blasted through the loudspeaker, cutting through the noise of our half-hearted quiz. "This is not a drill," he said. His voice panicked. "All teachers go into lockdown immediately. This is not a drill." The words sent a chill down my spine. The school had always been a place of comfort, predictable and safe, but the fear in the dean's voice was unmistakable. I looked around the room and saw the same confused expressions mirrored on everyone's faces. Mr. Thompson, who usually kept a calm demeanor, shot up from his desk. He swiftly moved to the light switch, plunging the room into darkness. He didn't say a word as he ushered us to the far corner away from the windows. There was a sharp buzz from the electrical panel at the back of the room, and then nothing. Complete silence. The power was cut. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. We sat there frozen for what felt like hours. The only sound was the soft rustling of clothes and the occasional whispered question, "What's going on?" Then we heard it. A man's voice, high-pitched and frantic, screamed from the hallway. His voice was raw, full of rage as he howled, "I'll kill all of you." A few girls in the class started crying, their sobs piercing the silence. I felt my own heart pounding in my chest as the man's screams grew louder, closer, echoing down the hallway. He was coming for us. The door to the classroom shook violently as the man began pounding on it. His crazed cries reverberated in our ears, and I could feel the heat of panic rising in the room. "Open up!" he screamed, slamming his fists against the door with such force I thought it would give way. The girls in the class were now full-blown sobbing, and I saw some of my classmates' faces pale with fear. I could hardly breathe. For what felt like an eternity, we were trapped in that room, surrounded by darkness and the man's raging fury outside. Finally, after what seemed like a lifetime, the banging stopped. His screams faded as he moved down the hallway, leaving us in a cold, unnatural silence. We stayed there, paralyzed by fear, for several more minutes before the dean's voice crackled back through the loudspeaker. His words didn't offer much comfort, but they confirmed our worst fears. "There's a mentally unstable individual on campus," the dean explained, his voice shaky. "He assaulted a staff member at the front desk and fled the scene. We don't know if he's armed, but we're conducting a sweep of the building. Teachers, please continue your classes in lockdown. Do not open your doors under any circumstances." The silence in the room was deafening. We were supposed to return to normal after the all clear, but how could we? Our safe, predictable school had become something else entirely. A few hours later, we learned that a janitor had found the man asleep in a storage closet at the back of the school, and there in his pocket was a .44 Magnum revolver. Rumors spread like wildfire among the students. No one knew if the man had been caught or if he was still out there. All we knew was that it was only by sheer luck that none of us had been hurt that day. But that wasn't the end. Months later, during the fall, another lockdown was initiated. This time it was October, a rainy, overcast day that cast a bleak shadow over the entire school. It started with loud bangs, four of them echoing from outside. I had thought it was thunder at first, but then the screams of students and teachers filled the air. Security rushed to the cafeteria, guiding students into the multi-purpose room. Panic spread like wildfire as we were herded inside. "Stay calm," an adult shouted, but their voice trembled. We were told to stay inside and not to leave under any circumstances. The back wall of the multi-purpose room was made of glass, and I could see security officers hurriedly drawing the curtains, blocking any view of the outside. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked one of the adults what was going on. The answer I got made my blood run cold. "There's a man outside, a registered sex offender. he explained. He's barricaded himself in front of his house and is threatening to kill anyone who comes near. He's been watching the school and we're taking no chances. My friend Eric, who'd overheard the conversation, came back with more details. Apparently, this man had been making threats to the school and had even been spotted near the windows of his house, carving messages into his skin with a knife. The lockdown lasted for what felt like hours. We were stuck in that room away from the chaos, but it didn't feel safe. All I could think about was the strange man watching us, waiting for the moment he might strike. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the lockdown was lifted. We were escorted back to our classrooms one by one, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had almost happened. And then there was the incident at my old high school. A few years after graduation, I had just landed a job as a computer intern, working in the basement of the very same school where all these horrors had unfolded. The basement was cluttered and dark, filled with old equipment and forgotten files. But there was a small, comfortable office down there, and that's where I spent my days. It was just another quiet afternoon when the school went into lockdown once again. This time the situation was even worse. A man with a gun had entered the school. I received a call from the front office urging me to stay in the basement until the situation was resolved. There was nothing I could do but sit in the dark waiting. But then the door to the basement creaked open. A figure appeared in the doorway and I froze. Someone was down there with me. The footsteps grew louder as the stranger walked toward my office. My heart raced in my chest and I ducked under my desk, trying to remain as still as possible. The man entered the room, but instead of turning on the lights, he just stood there breathing heavily. My phone buzzed and I cursed myself for the mistake. The text from Dave read, "Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Buckley. He's wearing a red shirt and hat. Don't come upstairs." I looked up at the man. His face was pale, but he seemed confused. He muttered something about hiding from the police, but I didn't trust him. In that moment, I realized he matched the description Dave had sent. He was wearing a red shirt and a hat. Suddenly, panic set in. A gunshot echoed from upstairs, and I bolted from my hiding place, running toward the exit. I made it up the stairs and found the police waiting, already surrounding the building. The man was arrested, and miraculously, Mr. Buckley survived. I don't know what happened to that man or why he targeted Mr. Buckley, but I'll never forget the fear of that moment, the gunshot, the man in the basement, and the endless feeling of being trapped in a nightmare. The lockdowns were never just drills, not for me, not for anyone who survived them. The days following the lockdown incident at the high school were eerily quiet, but that's the thing about fear, it doesn't disappear. It lingers like an old smell you can't shake no matter how many times you scrub the walls. That's how I felt in the weeks after the man had been apprehended. I'd been so sure that the worst was over, but now, every time I walked the halls of that school, I couldn't help but feel like something was watching me. Like I wasn't alone. I hadn't seen the man since the day he was arrested. He'd been carted off by the police, but rumors swirled among the students and staff about what had truly happened. No one seemed to know for sure. Some said the man was a regular visitor, a troubled soul who had been in and out of psychiatric institutions for years. Others whispered that he had been stalking the school for months, waiting for his chance, but nobody really knew. And the more I thought about it, the more questions piled up in my mind. One late afternoon, I was sitting alone in the basement office, going through some of the old computer files that had been left behind by previous interns. I hated the basement. It was dark, cold, and smelled like dust and mildew. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. The hum of the servers was the only sound that kept me company, and the cold air seemed to seep into my bones. I told myself it was just because I was tired, that it was nothing more than the usual feeling of isolation that came with working in that cramped, forgotten corner of the school. But then I heard it. A noise. A faint scuffing sound followed by a creak. It came from the other side of the basement, the one place I never dared to go, the storage room. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. The sound stopped as quickly as it started, but it was enough to send me into a full-blown panic. I checked my phone. No new messages, no calls. It had been over a month since that gunshot incident, so why was I still so on edge? I tried to shake it off. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. Standing up and walking to the door of the office, My fingers trembled as I gripped the door handle. I was about to leave the office when I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and unmistakable, coming from the other end of the basement. I turned, my stomach sinking. The door to the storage room was ajar, the dim light inside casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. I could make out the shape of something or someone moving in the dark. The footsteps stopped, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of something scraping against the floor. A heavy breath followed, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. There was no response, only silence, the kind of silence that presses in on you, making it hard to breathe. My mind raced, going over the list of possibilities. It could be Dave or Gary. Maybe they were just playing a prank on me. Or it could be someone else, someone who had been hiding in the school all along. I took a step toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached, I could feel the air grow colder, almost like I was walking into a freezer. I reached for the door, and that's when I saw it, a shadow. It moved swiftly across the room, too fast to be human. I jerked back in horror, my mind screaming to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot. Then the shadow stopped. A voice, soft, low, almost a whisper, but it sent a chill straight to my bones. "You're not supposed to be here." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My throat tightened as if invisible hands were choking me. All I could do was watch as the shadow seemed to take shape, growing larger, closer, more solid. Then in one swift motion, the figure stepped into the light. It was a man, or at least that's what I thought at first. His face was pale, his eyes sunken deep into his skull, his clothes were ragged, torn in places, and there was something strange about the way he moved, unnaturally stiff, like he was forcing himself to stay upright. The air around him seemed to shimmer as if the space itself was warping under his presence. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was a twisted, grotesque thing that sent waves of dread crashing over me. His lips were cracked, bleeding in places, and his teeth were sharp, too. Sharp, they gleamed in the dim light. "Don't worry," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm just here to watch." I took a step back, my legs finally responding to the terror that gripped me. "Who are you?" I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper. He tilted his head as though considering my question, then he chuckled low and dark. "Who am I?" he repeated as if amused. "Does it matter?" Before I could answer, he took a step forward, and I heard the unmistakable sound of something metallic scraping against the floor. My eyes widened as I saw the gleam of a knife in his hand, long, sharp, and glistening under the light. In a blind panic, I spun around and ran for the stairs. I didn't look back. I didn't dare to. The sound of the man's footsteps echoed behind me, growing closer. With each step, I reached the stairs and bolted up them, my heart hammering in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop running until I reached the main floor. I stumbled into the hallway, almost knocking into a teacher who had just entered the building. I grabbed her arm, my eyes wild, pointing back toward the basement. "There's someone down there," I gasped, barely able to form the words. He's not human." The teacher looked at me, confusion in her eyes, but before she could respond, the lights flickered. The hall was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights above. We both turned as we heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of the basement stairs. And then, just as suddenly as it had all started, there was nothing. No footsteps, no sounds of any kind. The silence was suffocating. The teacher reached for her phone, but when she glanced back at me, I saw her expression falter. "There's no one down there," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I saw him." I insisted, panic rising in my chest. "I saw him with my own eyes." The teacher said nothing more. She just turned and started walking back down the hall, her pace quickening as if she too had heard something I hadn't. I was left standing there, frozen in place, my heart racing, but I knew what I saw. I knew what was in the basement, and whatever it wasn't finished yet. The days after the strange incident in the basement felt surreal, like I was walking through a dream where everything was out of sync. The school resumed its usual routine, but the air felt heavier now. The teachers moved with more caution, and the students, well, they were more jittery than usual. Rumors about what happened in the basement spread like wildfire, and it didn't take long before everyone started whispering about the man I'd seen. But I knew they didn't believe me. How could they? What I had experienced didn't make sense. No one else had seen him, except one person did. It was 2 days after the basement incident when I ran into Gary in the hallway. He had been working upstairs when the lockdown happened and was just as oblivious to what had occurred in the basement as I was. He was holding a cup of coffee and looking unusually distracted. "Hey, man, what's up with you?" I asked.